The stars shone like scattered diamonds across the black velvet of space, and in the heart of the nebular empire, the royal palace gleamed with light that rivaled the sun. Towers of crystal stretched into the cosmos, floating gardens shimmered with colors no human eye had ever seen, and bridges of starlight connected islands in the sky. Among these wonders, Princess Elira moved with a grace that seemed to command the stars themselves. Her silver hair flowed like liquid moonlight, and her eyes, the color of deep nebulae, reflected the pride of 1,000 generations. Elira had always been known for her brilliance and cunning, a mind unmatched in her court. She was the youngest daughter of Emperor Valen, ruler of the Nebular Empire, and her reputation was built on wit, power, and a daring spirit. But pride had always been both her strength and her curse. It began one evening in the grand hall of the palace, where the royal family had gathered for the Festival of Light. The air hummed with magic, music, and laughter, and Elira's siblings challenged each other to contests of skill, intellect, and daring. But Elira, restless and bold, proposed a wager unlike any before. "I will challenge the fates themselves," she declared, her voice clear and commanding, echoing through the hall. "I will prove that no law, no cosmic rule, and no being, alien or mortal, can bind me. And what, little sister, shall be your wager if you fail?" The court held its breath, knowing the recklessness of her challenge could change the course of the empire. The challenge was set. Elira would summon the Loom of Fates, a magical construct that allowed one to glimpse and, for a brief moment, manipulate the threads of destiny. If she could alter a minor event in the timeline of her own choosing, she would prove her brilliance. If she failed, the punishment would be determined by the elders. Elira's preparation was meticulous. She studied the loom, a swirling orb of silver light suspended in the center of the royal chamber, its surface reflecting infinite possibilities. Her mind raced as she chanted the incantations, weaving magic and will together. She saw visions of countless futures, some glorious, some tragic. Her pulse quickened as she reached for the thread she wished to touch, the thread that represented her triumph over fate. But fate, as it always does, had its own plans. With a flash of blinding light, the loom reacted violently. Threads of destiny unraveled, swirling around Elira like a storm. She fought to control them, her hands trembling, her heart pounding. The crowd watched in awe and fear as the princess battled forces far beyond even her extraordinary power. And then, with a sudden snap, it was over. The thread slipped from her grasp. Elira's chest heaved. The loom pulsed with a cold, indifferent light. She had failed. Silence fell across the hall, heavier than any weight Elira had ever felt. The elders spoke as one, their voices calm but unyielding. "Princess Elira, by the laws of the Nebular Empire, and by the verdict of the fates themselves, you have failed. Your punishment shall be exile from our world and bond to one of the lesser beings, a human, until you prove your humility and understanding of life beyond your kind." Humans were fragile, unpredictable, and regarded by the Nebular as inferior, a race of soft flesh, incapable of true cosmic understanding. The very idea of a royal princess living among them was scandalous. Elira's face flushed, not with shame, but with fury. This cannot be," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of pride and disbelief. "You cannot send me to a human. Only by learning humility, courage, and trust will you find your freedom." In a whirl of magic and light, the portals of the palace opened. Elira felt herself lifted from the familiar brilliance of her world, falling through a tunnel of stars and galaxies, until she landed upon a world she had only observed from afar, Earth. It was chaotic and vibrant, the sky a soft blue instead of the endless black of space. Trees swayed in the wind, rivers shimmered with reflected sunlight, and the sounds of birds, insects, and human life surrounded her. Elira stood tall, her silver hair glinting in the sun, but every step she took made her feel fragile, exposed, human. Kale awaited her in a quiet courtyard. He was nothing like the heroes of her imagination, tall but not towering, strong but not radiant, eyes dark with calm, steady intelligence, and a presence that somehow made Elira feel both seen and unmoored. "You are Elira," he said simply, his voice neither warm nor cold but measured, carrying a weight of responsibility. "I am," she replied, lifting her chin, refusing to show fear. "And you are my host. You have pride, Elira, but pride will not protect you here. Only understanding, patience, and cooperation will." She learned to eat their simple food, to walk on solid ground without levitation, and to endure the limitations of her fragile body. Kale was patient, though firm, guiding her through mundane chores, social customs, and even the basics of human survival. Yet Elira could not help but notice him, the quiet strength behind his every gesture, the intelligence in his observant eyes, and the subtle warmth that sometimes softened his stern demeanor. Against her will, a curiosity bloomed. Who was this human who could challenge her pride without raising his voice? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of red and gold, Elira wandered to the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea. Waves crashed against jagged rocks far below, their roar echoing in the wind. She felt small here, mortal and alone, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel fear, not for herself, but for the future. Cale appeared silently beside her as he often did. "It is different here," he said, watching the horizon. "No palace, no empire, no endless power, but different is not weaker. It can teach you things your world cannot." More than anyone could know, you are not the only one bound by rules, Elira. Every being, alien or human, carries chains of some kind. Understanding them is the beginning of freedom. Yet something in his voice, something in the way he looked at her, not with mockery but with quiet awareness, stirred a strange warmth she had never known. The stars began to emerge in the evening sky, pale and trembling against the dark. Elira lifted her gaze, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine possibilities beyond the humiliation of her fall. Perhaps this human could teach her something her empire never could. Perhaps there was a lesson hidden in her punishment. Her thoughts were interrupted by a whisper of wind, carrying a faint shimmer of magic, alien magic, the kind she recognized as a test. She tensed, sensing that even in exile, the universe had not finished judging her. Cale's voice broke the silence. "You may think this punishment is cruel. Perhaps it is. But the world has a way of revealing truths in the most unexpected places. Tomorrow, you will begin your lessons not in power but in understanding, and perhaps in humility. But know this, I am no ordinary being, and I do not break easily." Yet even in her humiliation, a small seed of possibility took root. A possibility that her exile might not only teach her humility but reveal truths about herself, and about the human who would stand beside her. And somewhere deep within, Elira felt the faintest stirrings of something dangerous and thrilling. The recognition that fate, cruel as it could be, might just be offering her a chance at something more. Birds sang from the rooftops, and the scent of fresh bread and flowers floated through the narrow streets. To Elira, it was a strange, chaotic world, messy, unpredictable, yet somehow alive in a way her crystalline palace never was. She stood at the window of her modest new home, gazing down at the town below. Humans moved with a kind of frantic energy, chasing errands, greetings, and meals. Elira's heart, accustomed to the perfect precision of the nebular empire, quivered at the disorder. Every sound, every motion, every unpredictable movement grated against her alien sense of order. Cale appeared behind her quietly, as he always did, watching her with that calm, unreadable expression that both irritated and intrigued her. "Good morning, princess," he said. His voice was steady, grounding, as if it could anchor her in a world that seemed determined to float out of control. Elira turned sharply. "Do not call me that here. I am no longer your princess," she snapped, though the words lacked their usual bite. Deep down, part of her feared that the title clung to her like a shadow, impossible to remove. Cale raised an eyebrow but did not respond with anger. "Titles matter little here. You are Elira, a guest in this world and bound to learn its ways. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will become. We are bound together, whether you like it or not." Their first task of the day was simple, mundane even, but it was a challenge for Elira's alien sensibilities, buying food at the market. Humans jostled and shouted, selling produce, spices, and handcrafted goods. Elira's senses, attuned to the refined energies of her own people, recoiled at the chaotic mix of smells, sounds, and emotions. Cale led her with quiet confidence, navigating the crowd like a river cutting through rock. "Observe," he said softly. "Humans may seem chaotic, but they have a rhythm. You need to learn it if you wish to survive here." But she resisted, remembering Cale's warning. The pull to control was strong, but so was the need to learn patience. By the time they returned home, Elira's head spun with new sensations. The roughness of human fabric, the smell of earth and fire, the unpredictable warmth of human touch when Cale guided her hand to select fruits. She hated how small acts of learning seemed to chip away at her arrogance, revealing glimpses of humility she had never known. That evening, Cale took Elira to a quiet place outside the town. A cliff overlooked the rolling hills, dotted with forests and rivers stretching far beyond human sight. The stars began to appear, scattered like diamonds across the darkening sky. Elira felt a strange pull, a memory of home yet different, somehow warmer. "Look," Kale said, pointing to the horizon where the first stars blinked into existence. "The world is bigger than you think, Elira. Not just your empire, not just this town. There is space, life, and choice everywhere. You must see it to understand it. Understanding is what matters, and trust. If you can trust, you will find that strength comes in ways you cannot imagine." She learned to cook simple meals, to clean and organize a home with mortal hands, and to navigate social customs that seemed trivial to her alien mind. Each task, each small success, chipped away at the walls of pride she had built for herself. And yet she resisted fully surrendering to the lessons, keeping her alien superiority intact, if only in her mind. Kale, for his part, was patient but observant. He did not rush her, did not scold her, but guided her with a steady hand. Sometimes he would leave her alone, knowing she needed space to confront her own arrogance. Other times he would ask questions designed to make her think, to make her see human behavior not as chaos, but as a reflection of life's complexity. One day they took a walk through a forest, dense and alive with wind, rustling leaves, and the cries of hidden animals. Elira's senses, once attuned only to the precise energies of her empire, struggled to understand the raw vitality around her. "Do you see it?" Kale asked, stopping by a stream that sparkled with sunlight. "The world is full of balance, even when it seems disorderly. Everything has a place, Elira, even if it is not immediately obvious." She realized that this world had its own form of perfection, one she had never considered, and it unsettled her. I see it," she admitted quietly, "but it is different from what I know. It is fragile. You must learn to adapt too, or your pride will be your undoing." That night, as Elira lay in her simple bed, she thought of her empire, of the crystal towers and floating gardens, of her siblings and the loom of fates. She thought of the wager she had lost, of the humiliation she had endured, and of the human who had become her reluctant guide. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her heart. Could she truly learn from this fragile world? Could she understand humans in a way her people never could? And most unsettling of all, could she begin to see Kale not as a human beneath her, but as something more? The next morning, Kale led Elira to a local festival, a celebration of harvest and community. Humans laughed, danced, and sang, their joy imperfect yet radiant. Elira felt both fascination and discomfort at the raw emotions surrounding her. She had never witnessed such unrestrained happiness, such laughter untouched by formality or ritual. Kale held her hand as they moved through the crowd. "Experience it," he whispered, "not as a spectator, but as a participant. Feel it, not judge it." Kale watched her eyes softening. "You are learning," he said quietly, "not about humans alone, but about yourself." She realized she was beginning to see the human world not as a prison, but as a place of possibility. And she realized, with a start that made her stomach twist, that Kale had become more than a guide. He had become a presence she could not ignore. Her thoughts were interrupted by a flicker of movement at the edge of the festival. Kale noticed it too, his posture instantly alert. Elira followed his gaze and saw a faint shimmer, almost imperceptible, hovering in the shadows. It pulsed with a strange energy, one she recognized as alien, not entirely of this world. Kale's voice was low, cautious. "You are not safe here. Someone or something has come looking for you." She realized that even in this fragile, chaotic world, the threads of her empire had not stopped reaching for her. Her eyes met Kale's, and for the first time she felt the weight of trust and reliance she had never known before. Whatever danger approached, they would face it together, human and alien, bound by fate and circumstance. The festival lights flickered in the night, and the wind carried whispers of cosmic intrigue and mortal courage. Elira knew, with both fear and anticipation, that her journey in this strange world was only beginning. The forest beyond the human town was dense, alive with shadows and whispers. Trees towered like ancient sentinels, their branches weaving a canopy that filtered sunlight into golden patterns on the forest floor. Elira had walked these paths many times, guided by Kale, yet today the air felt different, charged with a quiet intensity that made her skin tingle. "You feel it too," Kale said, his voice low, almost reverent. He moved ahead with careful, practiced steps, sensing the energy around them. Elira followed, matching his pace, her mind alert. "I feel something," she admitted, her alien senses tingling with a mixture of curiosity and caution. It is not human, but it is here. Power like this attracts attention, from your empire and from forces beyond our understanding. Now it seemed her journey was about to become far more dangerous. They reached a clearing where the ground was bare, as if the forest itself had cleared a stage for what was to come. In the center stood a relic, a pedestal of stone etched with symbols that shimmered with a soft, alien light. On it rested a small crystal orb, humming with energy that made Elira's hair stand on end. The relic, Elira whispered, awe and fear mixing in her voice. It is real. Elira studied the symbols, tracing them with her fingers, feeling their energy pulse through her. Kale watched silently, his presence grounding her, his eyes never leaving hers. This is unlike anything I have seen, Elira said, her voice trembling with both excitement and fear. It is powerful, ancient, but dangerous. And that is why we must approach it with trust in each other and in our combined strength. As they reached for the relic together, a sudden ripple of energy pulsed through the clearing. Elira's body tensed, her alien senses screamed a warning. Shadows shifted along the edges of the forest, and figures emerged, ethereal, cloaked beings, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Guardians, Kale whispered, drawing a small blade that glimmered with an unknown energy. They protect the relic. We must prove our intentions or face them as enemies. We face them together. In the heat of battle, something shifted between them. Every glance, every touch, every coordinated movement built a silent understanding. Elira felt a connection she had never known, a bond forged not by blood or title, but by trust and shared danger. Finally, the Guardians paused, their glowing eyes assessing the pair. Elira and Kale stood side by side, breaths heavy, hearts racing. The Guardians stepped back, and the energy in the clearing softened. They had passed the test. Elira lowered her hands from the relic, her chest heaving. She met Kale's gaze, and for the first time she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. I could not have done this alone. Strength is in partnership, Elira. In unity, not isolation. Kale arranged their small supplies, his movements methodical, his presence comforting. Kale, she began hesitantly, how did you come to understand so much about the universe, about power, about balance? I learned that power alone does not save you, wisdom, patience, and trust do. I have also learned to see the truth in people, to understand their choices. That is what guides me now. But here, in this fragile human world, beside a human who seemed ordinary yet extraordinary, she began to understand a different kind of power. I think I understand, she whispered. At least a little. Perhaps this journey is teaching me what my empire never could. It was just the two of them, bound by circumstance and choice and something deeper, a recognition of each other, fragile yet undeniable. The fire crackled and the night deepened, but sleep did not come easily. Elira's mind raced with questions, possibilities, and the faint stirrings of feelings she did not yet name. She had spent her life avoiding vulnerability, and now, with Kale beside her, it seemed that vulnerability was the key to understanding and perhaps to freedom. The next day they approached the relic again. Elira's resolve was stronger, tempered by the lessons of trust and unity. But the forest seemed quieter now, almost too quiet, as if it held its breath in anticipation. Something is coming, Kale said, scanning the tree line. I can feel it, we are not alone. Shadows converged into a figure, tall and imposing, wrapped in a cloak of darkness that shimmered with starlight. Elira instinctively stepped back, feeling the familiar surge of alien power awaken within her. You are Elira of the Nebural Empire, the figure intoned, voice echoing with authority and menace. And you seek what is not yours to claim. She had been taught to face the impossible, to challenge fate itself, and now she would do so here on this strange world beside a human who had become more than a guide. He had become her partner, her anchor, her challenge. Together, Elira and Kale faced the figure. Energy crackled, shadows twisted, and the forest seemed to tremble. Elira's pride and alien power surged, but she tempered it with the lessons she had learned from Kale: patience, trust, understanding. The figure's eyes gleamed, assessing them. Perhaps you are stronger than I thought, but strength alone will not save you. You must choose wisely, or all will be lost. Elira realized, with a thrill and a fear she could not name, that she was no longer the same princess who had lost a wager. She was learning, growing, and facing forces beyond comprehension, with Kale at her side. And in that moment, she understood that the journey ahead would not only test her strength and pride, but her heart, her trust, and the very essence of who she was. The figure stepped back, vanishing into the shadows, leaving a whisper that lingered in the air. Your choices will shape more than your fate. They will shape the worlds themselves. They would face what came together, human and alien, bound by circumstance, trust, and something neither fully understood. Yet, the forest night stretched around them, filled with whispers of adventure, peril, and the promise of understanding that only the most forbidden journeys could bring. To be continued, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and violet. Elira and Kale stood on the edge of a cliff, overlooking a valley blanketed in shadows. The forest stretched endlessly, dark and mysterious, yet alive with the whispers of hidden creatures. Every rustle of leaves, every distant call of an unseen animal felt amplified in the tense silence that surrounded them. Elira's heart raced, not from fear of the wild, but from the anticipation of what lay ahead. The relic they had discovered was more than a tool of power. It was a key to her freedom, but also a dangerous magnet for forces beyond their comprehension. Kale, standing beside her, broke the quiet. The Empire will not stay distant. They know you are here. And now others are coming. For a moment she felt the pull of her past life, the towers of the Nebular Empire, the glow of the Loom of Fates, the proud eyes of her family. But now, in this world beside Kale, she felt something new stirring, a mixture of courage and caution, pride and humility. They moved cautiously down the slope into the valley. Every step brought them closer to the relic and closer to the dangers that sought it. Elira's alien senses were alert, detecting the faintest shift in energy, the presence of beings neither fully human nor alien. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. Its form was cloaked in darkness, yet its eyes glimmered with starlight. Elira's pulse quickened. She recognized the energy, the same as the mysterious figure in the forest, but stronger, more commanding. "You should not be here," the figure intoned, voice echoing with authority and warning. "The relic is not yours to claim. We seek understanding, not conquest." Kale's steady presence had become more than guidance. It had become a tether, a source of strength, and a challenge to her pride. "Then we will take that risk," Elira said, her voice firm. "We will face whatever comes together." Then with a sudden motion, shadows surged forward, attempting to block their path. Kale drew his blade, its edge glowing faintly with energy that hummed in resonance with Elira's own powers. Together they moved as one, Kale with strategy and precision, Elira with agility and raw energy. Shadows twisted and lunged, yet they met them with coordination born of trust and growing understanding. In the midst of the confrontation, Elira realized something she had not admitted before. She relied on Kale not because she had to, but because she chose to. He was her anchor in this unpredictable world, and for the first time, she felt the vulnerability of caring deeply for another being. The battle ended as abruptly as it had begun. The shadows retreated, leaving a faint shimmer of warning in the air. The figure had vanished, but its message lingered. Their choices were dangerous, their bond tested, and the consequences yet unseen. Elira sank to her knees, exhausted, and Kale knelt beside her. "You are safe for now," he said quietly. "But this is only the beginning. The Empire and others will continue to challenge us. You must decide what you are willing to risk. But you must understand, Elira, freedom, love, and trust all come with a price." She had always measured her worth by strength and pride, but now she was beginning to understand that true power lay in the courage to care, to trust, and to risk everything for what mattered most. The following days were a blur of preparation and vigilance. Elira and Kale moved through the forest, seeking ways to protect themselves and the relic. Each night they camped beneath the stars, sharing quiet moments of reflection. Elira's alien curiosity led her to ask questions about Kale's past, his knowledge, and his own experiences with loss and courage. Each answer deepened her respect, and a connection that neither fully understood grew stronger. One evening, as they rested by a river that shimmered like liquid silver under the moonlight, Elira spoke softly. "Kale, when I was in my empire, I believed power was everything. But here, I am learning something different. I am learning about courage and patience and trust, about myself and about you. Not about power or duty or the empire, but about this, about us." Its energy pulsed faintly, calling to Elira in a way that made her both anxious and exhilarated. She reached out, feeling the hum of power beneath her fingertips. Kale's hand found hers again, grounding her, reminding her of their bond. Before they could act, a sudden flash of light split the forest. Figures emerged, emissaries from the Nebular Empire, their armor gleaming with alien energy. Their leader stepped forward, his gaze sharp and commanding. "Elira," he said, voice cold and imperious. "Return with us at once. Your time in exile is over. Your actions here threaten not only your position but the balance of the Empire. You dare defy your empire? You risk everything, including him. Choose wisely, princess." The bond between alien princess and human warrior was more than defiance. It was strength born of trust, courage, and understanding. Elira felt a surge of energy, her alien power resonating with Kale's human determination. She realized that her exile had changed her, not just in body but in spirit. She was no longer a princess defined by pride and rules. She was a being capable of choice, of love, of courage in the face of impossible odds. The leader of the emissaries spoke again, voice sharp with warning. "This is your final chance, Elira. Return or face the consequences." She saw the unwavering trust there, the strength that had grown between them, and she knew what she had to do. "We will not return," she said, her voice steady, resonant with conviction. "We will face what comes together." Finally, with a gesture of frustration, they withdrew into the shadows, leaving behind a lingering threat, and a warning that their choices carried weight far beyond this forest. Elira sank to the ground, breathing heavily. Kale knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You were brave," he said softly. "Not just in facing them, but in standing for what you believe. You have reminded me of courage, of trust, and of hope." And somewhere deep within, Elira felt the stirrings of a dangerous, thrilling truth. That love, trust, and courage were more powerful than any empire, any relic, or any fate. But she also knew that the greatest trials were still to come, and the choices they made next would shape not only their lives, but the fate of worlds. The sky was a canvas of dark clouds, streaked with silver light from twin moons rising above the horizon. The valley, once calm and vibrant, now trembled under the approach of forces Elira had hoped to avoid. The emissaries from the Nebular Empire had returned, their ranks larger, their intent unmistakable: reclaim the princess and assert their authority. Elira stood beside Kale on a ridge overlooking the valley. Her silver hair shimmered in the moonlight, a stark contrast to the darkness gathering below. The relic pulsed softly at her side, a reminder of the power and danger it held. Every instinct in her body, both alien and human, screamed at her to flee, to hide, to submit, but she did not. She had learned too much, and she had chosen too much. Kale's hand found hers, steadying, grounding. "We face them together," he said, voice calm despite the storm around them. "No matter what happens, we act as one." "Together," she echoed. The word tasted of courage, of choice, and of the bond that had grown between them over weeks of danger, learning, and trust. The first wave of emissaries descended, their armor glowing with alien energy. They moved with precision, their intent to overwhelm evident. Elira stepped forward, her hands glowing faintly with her own energy, the air around her vibrating with the pulse of her alien power. Kale stood by her side, his focus unwavering, ready to defend her and the human world that had become their home. The battle began. Energy clashed against steel, light against darkness. Elira moved with a fluid grace, her alien abilities amplified by the trust she had learned to place in Kale. She had once believed power alone was enough to command respect, but now she understood the strength of unity, of trust, and of calculated courage. Kale's movements were precise and strategic. He anticipated the attacker's moves, countering with skill and speed. Elira watched him closely, adapting her own power to complement his actions. Each strike, each defense, each moment of synchronicity deepened the bond between them. They were no longer alien and human, they were partners, a fusion of strength, trust, and heart. Yet the battle was not without cost. The emissaries were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. Elira felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her, the lives of humans, the balance of worlds, and the fragile trust she had built with Kale. "Elira!" Kale shouted as a surge of energy knocked her off balance. She rolled to her feet, feeling the sting of minor injury, but she refused to yield. Her pride had transformed, no longer a barrier to humility, but a spark that fueled her courage. Together, they advanced toward the center of the valley, where the relic pulsed with a brighter light. It was both a beacon and a warning. Elira realized that to protect this world, to protect Kale, she had to embrace the full extent of her power and the lesson she had learned about trust. Kale placed his hand on the relic. "We do this together," he said, his voice firm, "not as conqueror and subject, but as equals." She felt the presence of the Empire, the threads of fate, and the pulse of the human world all at once. It was overwhelming, yet she no longer feared it. The emissaries tried to intervene, but Kale's focus and Elira's combined power created a barrier of energy, pushing back the onslaught. The valley trembled, the moons casting shifting shadows, but their unity held strong. "Elira," Kale said, voice filled with urgency, "now you must choose." Every instinct in her body weighed the choice. Her pride, her duty, her longing for her people, against the bond she had formed, the trust she had built, and the love she had begun to understand. She inhaled, drawing in the night air the scent of the forest, the whisper of human life, the pulse of the universe. And she chose not power, not pride, but connection. "I choose this world," she said, her voice ringing with clarity and conviction. "And I choose him." She glanced at Kale, their eyes locking in a moment that transcended fear, doubt, and even logic. Together. The emissaries were thrown back, their advance halted by the fusion of alien power and human courage. Elira felt the surge of energy course through her, not as domination, but as unity, her power tempered by love, trust, and understanding. The battle ended as abruptly as it began. The valley fell silent, the emissaries retreating into the shadows, their mission failed. Elira and Kale stood together, exhausted but unbroken. The relic's light softened, pulsing like a heartbeat, as if recognizing that its purpose had been fulfilled, not in conquest, but in choice. Kale lowered his hand from hers, his gaze softening. "You did it," he said quietly. "You faced the Empire, the relic, and yourself, and you chose wisely. And you taught me, Elira. You reminded me that strength is not just in survival, but in the willingness to care, to trust, and to risk everything for what matters most." The weight of the past weeks, the wager, the exile, the dangers, and the lessons, settled into a quiet peace. Elira realized that she had been transformed. She was no longer the proud princess who had lost a wager. She was a being capable of humility, courage, and love. The following days were gentle in contrast to the storm of battle. Elira and Kale worked to secure the relic, ensuring it could not be misused. They returned to the human town, where Elira's presence was no longer a curiosity or a threat, but a quiet, respected force of change and understanding. She visited the forest, the river, and the valley where the battle had been fought. Each place reminded her of lessons learned, the value of trust, the power of choice, and the courage found in connection. Kale was always at her side, a constant reminder that strength was shared, not imposed. One evening, as they watched the twin moons rise over the horizon, Kale spoke softly. "Elira, what will you do now? Will you return to your empire, or stay here, in this world that has become your home?" "I will not return, not while there is life here to protect, not while there is trust and love to honor." And in that moment she felt whole, balanced between two worlds, two natures, and two hearts united. The Nebural Empire would continue to watch, to test, to tempt, but Elira no longer feared them. She had discovered that courage was not in dominance, but in choice. That power was not in control, but in connection, and that love, even with its risks, could transcend worlds. The final night of their journey began quietly. Elira and Kale stood on the cliff once more, the valley below bathed in silver light. Stars twinkled above, ancient and eternal, as if witnessing the union of alien and human, pride and humility, courage and love. Elira felt the relic's energy settle into a soft hum, its purpose fulfilled. She looked at Kale, her eyes reflecting the moonlight and the unspoken promise of all that was to come. "Together," she whispered. Kale nodded, squeezing her hand. "Together," he replied. And under the twin moons, with the stars as witnesses, the alien princess and the human warrior embraced a future forged by choice, trust, and love. Worlds had collided, destinies had shifted, and in the end, the impossible had been made possible, not through power alone, but through courage, understanding, and a bond that could never be broken. The winds carried whispers of adventure yet to come, and the night held the promise of new journeys. Elira and Kale stood side by side, ready to face whatever the universe would bring, knowing that together they could overcome anything.